Welcome back, everybody, to the KC Sports Report. I'm your host, Michael Darcy, and I am once again joined by my friend Josh Fan of ShowMeFootball.com and ArrowheadAddict.com. And today we're going to talk about the Chris Jones dilemma. So, if you've been paying attention to the Chiefs offseason news, you would know that the Chris Jones situation has been very problematic. Will he report? Will he not report? Is he going to sit out? Is he not going to sit out? I mean, this has been the question that has been going around in most of the Chiefs' kingdom's minds for the better part of the last 2 months. And Josh, we have not talked about this topic on this channel together. So I wanted to get your thoughts on Chris Jones and what's going on right now, because we just watched that first preseason game and his presence was greatly missed. The Chiefs were not able to really force any pressure with the defensive line. And I think that leaves a lot of Chiefs fans, similarly to us, that, the Chiefs might have a problem here without Chris Jones on this team. So, Josh, what are your thoughts on Chris Jones, and do you think he's going to report?
Well, it's very obvious, like you said, after today's preseason game that they need him. It's just the defense doesn't feel as strong. It doesn't feel as good without Chris Jones there in the middle of it. It didn't really feel like they got any pressure from the defensive line. You mentioned it when you came on my channel for the live stream. All their sacks were mostly from blitzes. They weren't getting as much pressure as they would have if Chris Jones is there. And obviously, it's a preseason game, so you don't want to read too heavily into it. But the defense did not look good, and I don't think it's crazy to say that they didn't look good because their defensive leader wasn't there and the best player on the defense wasn't there. That's obvious stuff. Do I think he reports though? I think he reports before the first regular season game. I mean, he even tweeted about that not too long ago. You know, he's got one more year here. He acknowledges that. And even if he doesn't get extended, it sounds like before the regular season starts, he's still going to show up and he's going to play out this season. And he'd be sacrificing a lot of money if he didn't otherwise. I know I said in the video that I did that I wouldn't rule out 100% Chris Jones sitting out regular season games just because players have done it before. But that was before he tweeted that out, and I never predicted him to sit out games, but I was just saying, it's not impossible that Chris Jones sit out regular season games too, because we've seen players do that before. I know he was really good friends with Le'Veon Bell, and Le'Veon Bell sat out regular season games. So, look, these guys lose a lot of money, but they're also serious about their money when they hold out and when they sit out. That's why they're doing it. And I think Chris Jones has every right to hold out. And today's preseason game, and the fact that Charles Omenihu got suspended, just all these things keep happening to the Chiefs that prove that Chris Jones should hold out. Like, his holdout is working. Like, this Chris Jones is sitting back and he is laughing that, this is what's happening. Like, he knows that the Chiefs need him. The Chiefs know that they need Chris Jones. And so I don't know if that's going to motivate the two sides to get something done before the regular season starts, but I do think Chris Jones will be there by the time the regular season starts. And if we get to the regular season and he's still not extended, then you're probably looking at next offseason for something to get done.
I think it's funny because we've been paying attention to this situation for so long, and it's changed so drastically over a pretty short period of time. But it kind of started off with him saying that I'm not reporting unless I get a new contract. And then that tweet that you just mentioned, which I made a video that went really popular about how he was talking about how he's got one more year left on his deal and let's just enjoy this year kind of thing, which I took it as he's going to report and it's only a matter of time. I think he'll probably be back if he reports at all, before the third preseason game, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's just right before week 1 of the NFL season. And I think that's okay because, listen, Chris Jones does not want to play in the preseason, so it is what it is. But even in that video that I made talking about that tweet, he said that he'd play this year and that he'd finish out his contract. That didn't say anything about his future with the team. And I think, as I told you earlier, with guys like Tyrann Mathieu and Orlando Brown Jr. and even Tyreek Hill, the Chiefs front office have told them that, we're going to try to get a deal worked out. And, if not, be patient, but you'll get paid. Just, play out your final year under your contract and we'll work with you. We'll get it done. And the common theme between all three of those players, granted this situation is a little bit different, all three of those players never got extended. They got told to wait. They got told to be patient. They got told to play that final year under their deal. and they ended up leaving in free agency, or in Tyreek Hill's case, he got traded. So every single example that the Chiefs have set has been a negative example. And that almost leads me to believe that the Chiefs have no intention of paying Chris Jones long term, that they're just trying to get him back for one more season, one more final dance. And after this year, they'll either tag him and trade him, or they'll just, let him go to free agency. I have a hard time thinking they're not going to try to get anything for him, but it kind of just seems like they're playing the long game, but they also don't have any intention of bringing him back. And I do agree, right now he's got all the leverage. With Charles Omenihu not, playing for the first 6 games of the season, and the Chiefs not really having any bona fide pass rushers outside of him, he's got all the leverage in this situation. But I kind of question the Chiefs' motives and whether or not he's even going to be here, after this season.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You mentioned the other situations in which the Chiefs have told us, hey, we really like this guy, we want to extend him, and then it doesn't happen. There's obviously a few key differences with Chris Jones, like one of them being the fact that what a lot of people aren't considering, and I don't think this was the same for like Tyrann Mathieu and Orlando Brown, but like you look at Tyreek Hill, they wanted to extend him, and then there was reports that, okay, they're in positive talks, like this extension is going to get done. And then Devontae Adams got traded, and that deal happened, and that just made Tyreek too expensive. And I think that taught the Chiefs a lesson that, hey, maybe we shouldn't wait so long to extend these guys, because we lost Tyreek Hill because we waited too long. But then what people aren't considering now with Chris Jones, because I see a lot of comments from people too, a lot of stuff on social media saying Chris Jones or Veach is messing around and he's not going to extend Chris Jones, like he's waiting too long. How do we know that Chris Jones and his agent aren't saying, hold on a second, we're going to wait and see what these other guys get paid, and then we'll talk to you? Because in all reality, if you paid attention to the way the market works, if Chris Jones got extended before any of those guys, then all of those guys were going to get more than Chris Jones, because that's how the market works. And then Chris Jones would have just ended up being like the 6th highest paid again. And Chris Jones feels like he should be the 1st or 2nd highest paid. And I don't blame him. He absolutely deserves to be paid that much. But I have a question for you, Michael. With Chris Jones, and all of a sudden now I just forgot my question, what it was. Hold on. God, what was I about to ask you? It was something to do with, you know what? Just why don't I get your thoughts on that, and I'm sure it'll come back to me.
Okay, well, one thing that I wanted to say is, before I made that video talking about how I think that he's going to play in 2023, I initially went to 810 with the intention of talking about a report that Nate Taylor tweeted out that, the Chiefs were not willing to make Chris Jones the highest paid defensive tackle in football. And I kind of saw that as, Chris Jones was asking to be the highest paid defensive tackle in football, and they kind of just told him no. And at a certain point, we don't know how far the two are in terms of, coming to a deal, but they've got to be pretty far off, whether it's in guaranteed money or year average, but the two must not be very close, because I think that Chris Jones is probably saying to everybody that I was the best defensive tackle in football last year. I just won a Super Bowl championship. I'm better than Aaron Donald right now. And I think that he can make that argument, and it'd be very valid of him to say, but I just wonder where the two are in a deal, because it just seems like they're so far apart. And I just don't think the Chiefs are going to pay him.
Yeah, the question did come back to me, so I was going to ask you. So if Chris Jones comes back after preseason is over and after training camp and right before the first regular season game, do you think he starts? Do you think he is automatically made starter, number 1 on the depth chart, or do you think Andy Reid is going to stick to his guns? Because I know Andy Reid historically does not like it when players don't show up to training camp and do not play the preseason. I feel like there's some guys you make an exception for. Personally, I would make an exception for Chris Jones, but do you think the Chiefs staff would make it a personal thing and say, no, you're going to have to earn your spot back because these guys were here and you were?
I think it's tough, because Chris Jones is just flat out better than anybody else that they even have at the position. Yeah. So I understand the form of punishment of saying, hey, man, you weren't doing any of the work all offseason long with us. Why should you just expect to come in and start right away? It's kind of like the kid that does none of the work on the group project and expects to get treated the same when in reality he just doesn't. But Chris Jones is a special player and he's different. And I could also see him starting just purely out of necessity basis because, you got guys like Charles Omenihu that's not going to be there and injuries could happen. And so I think the Chiefs are going to need Chris Jones just because of he's a good body to have. And I think it's in theory, it sounds good. Like, oh yeah, we're going to punish Chris Jones. But I have a hard time seeing them actually do that when it comes time to actually play meaningful football.
It just seems like something the coaching staff would consider, just the way they operate. Again, I know Andy Reid gets upset when guys don't show up. I feel like if it was anything, it would be like, okay, he sits out the first drive. And now it's like, okay, we need you, Chris Jones, get back in there. Because
Enough of a
we saw it today in
punishment.
the preseason game. Like they need him. They were just at that point they would be punishing themselves by not putting Chris Jones in the game.
Yeah, and I also think that, if you punish Chris Jones by not playing him, you still need to keep that relationship intact if you want to have any chance of, having any peaceful discussions about his future with the team in the city. So you don't want to piss him off. And he's already going to be pissed off because he's not going to be paid what he thinks he should be paid. But at this point, he's not going to sit out. At least I don't think he's going to sit out because, I think he's going to make like $20 million this year. So it wouldn't really make financial sense for him to sit out if, I think it's $1 million for every game that he doesn't play or something like that.
Yeah.
So it just
It gets pretty hefty.
It wouldn't make sense for him to do that. Like you can skip out on training camp and you can pay the $50,000, but once it comes regular season time and the big boy checks have to be, signed, I think that's probably when he comes back.
Yeah, the tough thing about Chris Jones being extended is that I think they were always going to wait to see how the market played, and then it's like, all right, we'll go from there, see how much this guy gets paid, see how much this guy gets paid, and then we'll give you what you deserve, which is like being the second highest paid. Because originally Nate Taylor reported at the beginning of the offseason that he wanted to be at least the second highest paid, which I always like that wording to me made it sound like he knew he wasn't going to get as much as Aaron Donald, but they were still going to make him the second highest paid. But then Quinnen Williams got like 29 million per year. And I believe Aaron Donald's making like 31.
I think it is
So
31.
now it's almost kind of to a point where if you're paying him more than Quinnen Williams, you also kind of have to pay him more than Aaron Donald just because those two numbers are so close together. And Chris Jones does have a case to make that he deserves that money. And now the Chiefs are probably saying, "Oh, well, we don't want to do that. We'll give you this, but we don't want to do that." Chris Jones has a right to sit out. Like, it's hard for me to take the team side on this just because I feel like Chris Jones is a guy that you just give him a blank check. You do whatever you need to keep him around because he's that important to what you do. And if you want to win Super Bowls, you got to do it with Chris Jones. It's because it's not happening without him. I know people are obsessed with extending the window and all that stuff, but if you're talking about winning a Super Bowl in the next 2 to 3 years, you're going to need Chris Jones in order to do that. I don't think he's a guy like Tyreek Hill where you can get rid of him, but you can find guys that can help. You can find guys that can help on the defensive line, but it's much harder to come by really good pass rushing defensive tackles. And there's not really many people that come close to Chris Jones that can give you what you need so you can win a Super Bowl. I just think he's too important to what this team does. And his holdout is going about as well as he could have hoped because the Chiefs need him badly, as we've seen, because of what's transpired over the past week or so.
And I agree 100%. And I think that the Chiefs cannot be cheap forever. You're going to have to pay somebody. And Chris Jones is the kind of guy you have to pay. If you want to be in the big games every year and, winning Super Bowls, you need somebody to anchor your defense. And Chris Jones has proven to be that guy ever since he's been here. And you paid him back then. He's only gotten better. He was a defensive player of the year candidate last year.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that he could have won the whole damn thing. So Chris Jones is the kind of guy that you don't let walk out of your organization. You do everything in your power to pay him. And that's kind of why I feel a little bit antsy about saying, you know what, we'll get to you, Chris. We'll wait till next year. Because who knows? Maybe next year he's pissed off and he says, you know what, I don't even want to be here to begin with. Maybe they lose in, like a title game. And he's just like, you know what, I got paid this year. I'm going somewhere else. I'm going to get exactly what I'm worth. And I think there could be a team out there, depending on what he does this year, if he plays, he can make $32, maybe $33 million a year if he wins like defensive player of the year.
Yeah, if he hits the open market, he's probably going to get what he wants and maybe more. And I also fear like if you do let him hit the open market, uh, where does like what if he goes to like an AFC rival? What if he goes to the New York Jets and they pair him up with Quinn Williams? Like that's a lot of money to tie up in defensive tackle, but that would be like the best defensive tackle duo in NFL history. Like
You couldn't stop
I,
that.
I
You'd be
yeah,
screwed.
yeah, exactly. And I don't know, man. I don't want Chris Jones to go. I think this team needs him. And as I said when you were on my channel on the live stream, people are going to talk about the age and no, he's not going to be that productive. If you extend him into his 30s, look, if you give him like a 5-year extension, sure, he may not be good on the last 2 years of that deal, but I really don't care. It's about the next three. If you can lock him up for the next 3 years, I'm fine with that. And then usually, like we see all, or like we saw in like the Frank Clark deal, they signed him 5 years, $100 million. Well, the last 2 years, the Chiefs could do a lot to save money. They had the option to cut him both years. They cut him last year. The last 2 years, the deal really didn't matter all that much. It matters a little bit just because of the dead cap and stuff like that. But like, look, this is Chris Jones we're talking about, guys. Like, just pay him, extend him. I don't care if it's for 5 years. I don't care if he's not going to be that good into his 30s. Like, it even looked like Ndamukong Suh, like, after he kind of fell off, he was still getting 1-year deals at all these places and he was still being productive. Like, you're telling me Chris Jones can't be like elite for another 3 years and then be like Ndamukong Suh level for the last 2 years of the contract and he can play with the contract a little bit in the last couple of years. Like, I think this is a no brainer.
He definitely could. And, to kind of close this whole thing out, we both agree that Chris Jones is going to report at some time and play this year. The fines would just be too much. And I think that he needs the Chiefs and that $20 million this year. But the future is unknown. The future is undetermined. And I think that the reason that I'm concerned, I don't know how you feel, is I just feel like there's a lack of urgency. And they showed this lack of urgency in the past with guys like Tyrann Mathieu and Orlando
Mhm.
Brown Jr. And we wholeheartedly believed that they were going to be back, and they just never were able to get anything done. So I kind of am worried that the lack of urgency is showing more signs of stuff that's happened in the past than, progress in the future. So that's why I'm concerned about Chris Jones' future in Kansas City in 2024 and beyond. But for 2023, I think he's going to be on this team. Could it be a last dance? It could very well be the last dance, but I do think that Chris Jones will be on this team in 2023. So, Josh, do you have anything else you want to add in this video?
Not really. I think we pretty much covered everything. I mean, we both want Chris Jones here. We both understand how important he is to this team. I know people will point to other situations like even Orlando Brown, but Orlando Brown's a little bit different because they did offer him a big contract and he turned it down and he ended up getting less than what the Chiefs originally offered him in free agency. The Chiefs played that one perfectly. Tyrann Mathieu's a little bit different because honestly, I don't think the Chiefs ever really wanted to keep Tyrann Mathieu around. I think that was one where they just kind of fed people what they wanted to hear, and they're like, "Yeah, we like Tyrann," but I don't think they ever really wanted to extend him. I think they were ready to move on. And then there's Tyreek Hill, which that's the closest thing to Chris Jones, but I mean, it's still different just because of Chris Jones's importance. I think it's much higher than Tyreek Hill's. As
And
much
they
as
would
I
have
love Tyreek
signed,
Hill.
they would have extended Tyreek Hill if he would have just taken the money,
Yeah.
but he got
Yeah.
greedy. But I hope that Chris Jones doesn't fall in that same boat. So, Josh, I think this has been a good episode. I think that we went over each and every single possible possible outcome. My final question for you is, where can the people find you?
You can find me here on YouTube. That's just my name, Josh Fan. You can follow me on Twitter at ShowMeFB for Show Me Football. And then, of course, you can check out my work on ShowMeFootball.com and ArrowheadAddict.com.
Definitely go do that, guys. It'll all be linked in the description of this video. As for me, obviously subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. What are you doing if you haven't? The Twitter, KC Sports Report, and the Instagram, KC_Sports Report. The personal at the Michael Darcy on both Twitter and Instagram. And check out my work on Bleacher Report. We've been doing a bunch of stuff for them. And until next time, guys, thank you for watching this video, and go Chiefs.